It was not your imagination. We didn't have the video. I suspect I loaded it into the computer incorrectly this morning. So we'll just move past that. The words were still just as meaningful. I think sometimes our idea of what peace is simply the absence of violence. So peace between nations is when there's a cessation of violence. And peace has got to be something more than that. It's got to be something bigger than that. And I think biblically, from the very beginning, peace is definitely something more than that. The Hebrew word for peace, shalom, which is also used as a greeting, not only in Hebrew, but in Arabic. Salam, peace be upon you, salam alaikum. Shalom, peace be to you. When that exchange, and it's a way of saying hello as well as goodbye. And that peace is not just, in fact, the word shalom means so much more than that. It is a pointing towards wholeness, fullness. So when the speaker that we heard this morning talked about the harmonious relationship that he understands salvation to be, us finally entering into a fuller, harmonious relationship with God. And let's be frank, you cannot be in a harmonious relationship with God and a dissonant relationship with your neighbor. 1 John made that very, very clear. If you think you can be in harmony with God and not with your neighbor, you're lying to yourself. So that harmony is truly that deepness, and it's a wholeness. It's a wholeness in yourself. It's a wholeness in creation. It's a wholeness with one another. Now, there have been various points in my life when I have experienced peace. And I'm thankful for those moments of peace. I've talked about some of those moments when I came to peace when Linda was in the hospital. That was certainly a moment of peace. After the birth of our children, there was kind of a peace as I held them at first, that moment of things being okay, particularly with Joshua. Linda said, this is not going to work. We really need to do something else. And of course, she had an obstetrician who was sure he knew what was right. And he said, just keep pushing. And eventually he said, this is not going to work. And she said, I told you this 8 hours ago, but you didn't listen to me. And then there was some concern. Josh was born with a little fever, and he had to go downstairs and into a special room, and I wasn't going to let him be alone. And they said, you can't go. And I said, oh, yes, I can. And I did. And I just stood next to him, and I put my hand on his little blanket and just was there with Josh, trying to be the peace for him that I was feeling that somehow was coming upon me. The biggest feeling of peace, I have to say, that ever came over me, and I don't know how it came except by a gift of God, is when we were in the process, part of the history of St. James is we used to have a 14,000 square foot building right about 1,000 feet that way. And we were moving out of that building. It was 2015, September the 19th, I believe. We got a call from Josh, who was not feeling well, on the road home to visit. He thought he had the flu, and as it turned out, what was happening is we discovered at 19 that he had type 1 diabetes. And so they came, we didn't know exactly where he was or how to find him, except that we had to go and try to find him somewhere. And so we left the house. Linda was driving, giving, as Linda is wont to do, because she's very organized, a set of commands about what I was to do while sitting in the passenger seat of the truck. We got down Columbia Pike to Gallus Road, and I said, honey, you have a great list. I think it's great you have that list. You should do those things, because you're sending that list to me so fast, I can't do all these things. How about if I drive? And you see, in 2015, I had only been 3 years into a meditative practice, centering prayer. 4 years. But I felt complete peace driving there. There was nothing I could do in the moment. Linda was doing all the important calling. All sorts of people helped us out. We found Josh. It was scary. He didn't look good. He was in the ER. He was breathing in a very shallow way. It was the worst we had ever seen him. Our athletic young man was not looking good. And here he is. He's 28 years old now. He's doing just fine. But I felt the peace of God descend on me. It's the only way we drove carefully to Charlottesville, where they had taken him to the ER. And the only way we made it there safely was the peace of God upon me. And I don't know if it ever quite descended on Linda on the way down there. She was not at peace at all. So that's part of the reason why I said, how about if I drive, honey? I'd like for us to make it there in one piece. P-I-E-C-E as opposed to P-E-A-C-E. But we made it there. And the peace of God really came upon me in a way I can't fully describe, except that I felt surrounded and held, and I knew that we could get there. And that's all we could do. I could drive only as fast as the person in front of me, that honking at them, running them down with the F-150 was not going to help anyone. We'd have to stop and talk to the police if I did that. So I was able to just and I was in a different place with traffic in those days. So we made it, and God's peace was upon me. In the book of Isaiah, this is actually the very first piece from the second book of Isaiah. It's divided, Isaiah is really divided, even though it's one big book, into sort of three sections. First Isaiah is chapters 1 through 39. Second Isaiah begins with chapter 40, which is what we'll be reading today, part of chapter 40, beginning with verse 1. And then third Isaiah begins around Isaiah's a long book, I think chapter 55, all the way through 66, which is the last chapter. In any case, this is right at the beginning, and the prophet is offering words that I think you will have heard before, which the church grabbed onto and said, oh, this points to Jesus. Well, it did, but it also pointed to more than that, and we're meant to hear the echo of that in these words, Isaiah chapter 40. Listen with me, if you will. Console my people, give them comfort, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem's heart and tell it that its time of service is ended, that its iniquity is atoned for, that it has received from Adonai's hand double punishment for all its sins. A voice cries out, clear a path through the wilderness for Adonai. Make a straight road through the desert for your God. Let every valley be filled in, every mountain and hill be laid low, every cliff become a plain, and the ridges become a valley. Then the glory of Adonai will be revealed, and all humans will see it together. The mouth of God has spoken. A voice commands, cry out, and I answer, what will I say? Say, all flesh is grass, and its beauty is like the wildflowers. The grass withers and the flower wilts, but the breath of God blows on them. How people are like grass. Grass withers, flowers wilt, but the promise of God to us will stand forever. Go up on a high mountain, you who bring good news to Zion. Shout with a loud voice, you who bring good news to Jerusalem. Shout without fear, and say to the towns of Judah, here is your God. Adonai, O sovereign one, you come with power and rule with a strong arm. You bring your reward with you, and your reparation comes with you. Like a shepherd, you feed your flock, gathering the lambs and holding them close, and leading mother ewes with gentleness. This is the word of the Lord for this morning. Thanks be to God. A voice cries out in the wilderness, Clear a path for God. Clear a path. Make way. And if we think it's going to be an easy task, we're told we're going to fill in valleys and knock down mountains, and that all of that must be cleared away. Now, we can see this as a literal piece. If you want to, you can imagine flattening mountains and filling in valleys. And how do you move mountains? One shovel at a time. One shovel at a time. But I see something beyond that as I listen to this text. And that what I listen to is that in order to clear that way for God within, for that peace within, there's a lot of rough places and valleys within us that need filling in and leveling. That the hard work of finding the peace that passes all understanding that Jesus promised us in John chapter 14 comes first by looking within. But that's only the beginning. So I want to suggest to you that, first of all, we're meant to look for an inner peace. And I want to suggest to you a way that you might find inner peace. I know you all live busy lives. You got all sorts of things going on in your world. There are lots of you. Some of you roll out of bed, and the first thing you got to do, you got a long list of things so you can get out the front door, so you can get to work, wherever you're going, all those kinds of things. What would it look like if even for the first minute of your day, when you sat on the edge of your bed, you just caught your breath? Just like we did earlier at the beginning of worship this morning, what would it look like if you just breathed in and breathed out? Now, if you have more than just a moment, what would it look like? What would it look like if you sat down for about 5 minutes and practiced a meditation? Now, there are lots of different ways to practice meditation. Centering prayer is about letting go of all your thoughts, and you choose a word that you use to let go of all those thoughts. As a thought arises, you recall that word and your intention not to think, and you let it go. But another form of meditation would take a favorite verse. Perhaps this week, the favorite verse could be something like when Jesus says in chapter 14, "Peace I leave with you," of the Gospel of John. "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives, give I to you." What would it look like if for 5 minutes in the morning you just said those words over and over again to yourself? Or you thought to yourself of perhaps of the Beatitude, "Blessed are the peacemakers." Blessed are the peacemakers. And perhaps you let that be, "Blessed are the peacemakers. Lord, make me a peacemaker." Just let that kind of sink in and shape the way you are if you have those 5 minutes. But if you don't, take that moment to find inner peace at the beginning of your day. When it's lunchtime and you have that, sometimes I'm eating and working at the same time. I take my food down to my computer, I'm sitting in front of it, I'm working, I'm eating at the same time. But what would it look like when your lunchtime began, as you were getting ready to get up from your desk or wherever and go to the kitchen or wherever it is you're getting lunch? You just took 3 breaths to slow yourself down. It's been a crazy morning so far. The video didn't work so far. Did it destroy the world? No, it didn't. You know, those kinds of things. There would have been a time if the video hadn't worked at the beginning of worship, that would have been the end for me. I'd be like, okay, well, somebody else better preach because I'm done. I'm unraveled already. Man, it didn't work. And Mark just said, and I just was like, we can still hear the guy. He sounds good. He says good things. All we would have seen is a guy sitting on his stoop talking to us. It's perfectly fine. But you see, you have to let those things go. And sometimes just 3 breaths as you begin your lunch break might be enough to let go and find inner peace, if only for just a moment. And sometimes you just feel caught up in the chaos. Got to rush out the door, got to rush over here, got to rush over there, this to prepare, this to get to. If you have more than one job, you got this job, and then you got to get to the next job, and you got to be on time, you got to make sure all those things happen. Got to shop, all the things you got to do. What would it look like for just a few minutes to find inner peace? So we start by finding inner peace. What about peace with others? What are some ways you might find peace with other people in your life? I want to suggest a practice. Instead of listening to respond, which is our natural way to listen, I'm listening to you, waiting for you to say something that I can respond to. Oh, I heard on the news. Before you've even finished your sentence. Oh, I heard on the news so-and-so, or I heard this, or, when I read this article, this. Active listening says, I have nothing to say until you're finished talking. And whatever I have to say, whatever seems to be jumping out of me right now, I can let go of that. I'm just going to hear what you have to say. And if I just listen to you, perhaps I'll hear more deeply what it is you're trying to say to me. And then when I respond to you, I respond with I statements, not with you statements. Well, that's stupid. It's not a good response. Let me just tell you, if you're looking for peace with someone else, starting out, that's stupid, or where did you get an idea like that, or oh my gosh, that's not a good place to start. I struggle with the same thing. Here's how I came to my way of seeing. There's a whole different feel to that. I tell my story. It doesn't negate your story. It just is my story. Now, the challenging thing for every single one of us in this room and every one of you online is for every one of us there are that many stories and ways of perceiving life. There's not just one way. I used to wonder why everybody wasn't smart enough to see things the way I do. Come on. And then I realized it has nothing to do with smart or any other kind of adjective you can attach to it. We had different experiences that brought us to this very moment. And so I'm definitely going to have a different story than you do. Now, for whatever reason, and I'd like to believe because there are some good stories and maybe I hit some good points, you listen to my stories on a regular basis, like at least once a week on Sundays, and then sometimes on Tuesdays, and occasionally on Thursdays. There's a lot of stories you listen to. And I listen to other people's stories too. But that interpersonal connection is actively listen to what the other person is saying. And when you do get an opportunity to respond, and don't just jump in, let there be a pause between it. In fact, perhaps before you say anything ever, one of the things I tell the women I teach at Friends of Guest House, I teach a class on healthy relationships. We practice the pause before we begin class every week. I ring a little Tibetan singing bell and we sit for a minute, and I just said, just practice changing gears. You've come from lunch. I've driven here from home. Let's take a moment, practice a pause before we jump in. Pause. Pause before you say anything. It'll never hurt to pause before you say anything. But one of the things I suspect you may have learned, but I definitely have, is once you've said it, you cannot take it back. It is out there. You can apologize for it, but it's still out there. And the other person might never forget that. You might never repair the relationship because in a moment of the heat of the moment, you said whatever came to your mind. So practice interpersonal peace. Practice finding your own peace. You deserve peace. I'm not just talking about the inner peace I talked about at the beginning. Practice personal peace. What are you doing to take care of yourself, to actually step back from the rest of the world? Are you saying yes to everything everybody asks you to do? Everything everybody asks you to do, say, oh, sure, I can do that. Oh, sure, I can do that. Because guess what, my friends? The more yeses you say, the more no's you're really saying. Because there's no way in the 24 hours allotted in your day, the 168 hours you get every week, that somehow magically you're going to be able to do all the yeses you say yes to. So good self-care is setting some boundaries. Finding peace with yourself includes saying no. And sometimes it's no to yourself. You want that second bowl of ice cream. Chocolate, pecan, amazing marshmallows, chocolate sauce on top, a hot brownie underneath, just kind of melting it all together. You know, oh, that's fantastic. You don't need 6 of those bowls. Well, maybe you do. No, you don't. Practicing saying no to yourself. I don't have to have a second bowl of ice cream. I don't have to have as big a bowl, first bowl of ice cream as See, for me, a bowl of ice cream looks about like this. I like a bowl of ice cream that I can hold in both my hands and that I have to set on the table to eat out of. That's what. There used to be a place down in Springfield Mall when we first moved here. I don't remember what it was called, but they had something called a Monster. And no, I think I'm thinking of Ben & Jerry's, because Ben & Jerry's had the Vermonster that had 26 scoops of ice cream and chocolate sauce and marshmallows and bananas. Whipped. We've never had one. We talked about it. Now they don't. It's discontinued. They don't offer it anymore, I don't think. So it's probably good. You don't have to have that much. You know, practicing saying no is a good, healthy thing. Having boundaries is probably a very good thing for you. Looking out, finding peace with yourself. Give up perfectionism. I will tell you, it's easier said than done. I am what I like to call a recovering perfectionist. For a long time in my life, I never felt like anything I did was quite good enough. And because I didn't feel like it was quite good enough, I expected things to be perfect, no mistakes. I got past that, obviously, in many ways. But it's part of the reason why my family always gives me a hard time on Sunday afternoons. Not always, because I've gotten better about this. But it used to be after I preached a sermon, no matter how good or amazing it was, I'd come home and I'd rake myself over the coals all afternoon long. It wasn't perfect. I should have said this. I shouldn't have said that. I wish I hadn't told that story. I wish I had told this story. That whole dance is all of my recovering perfectionism coming up. It wasn't quite good enough. It didn't change everybody's life. Everybody didn't leap up and say, Jesus is amazing, we're going to go out and change the world right now. Like that happens when I've never heard a sermon that did that for me. The truth is, recover from our perfectionism, giving ourselves space to make mistakes. That's a way to develop peace with yourself. I learn a heck of a lot more from my mistakes than I do from my successes. Believe me. I spent 9 hours with my 3D printer this week trying to convince it to 3D print for me so I could have something to give you all this morning, which is a sign of peace that you'll be able to carry with you if you wish after service today. But that battle, I was like, listen, and even the product was not as perfect as I wanted it to be. How come that's not smooth over there? We're going to have to print that again. Well, eventually you run out of time. There's no more printing. But the truth is, it's hard to find peace in this world. But until you find that sense of inner peace, that interpersonal peace, and that peace that we grant ourselves, we'll never have peace in our political conversations. We'll never have peace in our schools or peace anywhere else. Never mind what's going on in Ukraine, in Gaza, In Syria, I mean, who knew a week ago that Syria would have a whole new government or in the process of a whole new government by this morning? I mean, never mind the lack of violence in the world. A true peace, because if you live from if you live from a place of peace, other people will feel that. I'm an intuitive. If I go into a room and somebody is wound up tight, I can feel it. I can feel it when I sit with someone. You can feel it too. Even if you're not an intuitive, you can tell when somebody's wound up a little bit too tight today. But when you're with somebody who's at peace, when you sit with someone who's at peace with themselves, at peace with God, at peace with the world, it's a different feeling. And that peace kind of oozes out onto you. That peace kind of oozes out onto you. So, this week, practice peace. Practice peace by finding some moments to find some inner peace. When somebody starts talking to you, and if you're anywhere that involves other human beings or the phone rings, practice peace. If you choose to answer the phone when a salesperson calls you, be peaceful with them. I'm not interested. No, I'm really not interested. No, no, no. I am really, really, really not interested. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you find someone else who would like your product. Goodbye. It's a whole different thing than, what are you doing calling me at this time of the night? Are you some kind of fool? You know, I even said that peacefully. But find the peace. Practice peace. And when you're not feeling peaceful, catch your breath, if only for a moment. When you feel turmoil twisting you on the inside, you can do this. Because, see, the promise of peace is not grounded in you. The reason you practice peace, inner peace, and interpersonal peace, and peace with yourselves, and peace with God, by letting go of your mistakes, by asking for forgiveness, by seeking that connection. The reason you do that is because it changes the whole way you flow into the world. It changes the whole way. And you can make that difference. So, I printed little peace signs for all of you. They look like this. You're far away, you probably can't see them. Unfortunately, I have no way to send this through the internet to you, so only people in person. If you're on the council and we run out of them, take them last. And the reason why I say that is because I'm printing more, and I can make sure that each of you get them. In fact, one was on the printer when I left the house this morning, because I really wanted 30 of them, and I didn't get 30. So I have these golden colored ones, and I have these beautiful lime green colored ones. You can carry them in your pocket. And whenever you find it in your pocket, you can just take a moment to breathe. It can be a reminder. It has a little hole at the top. You can hang this on your tree if you have one, as a reminder that the peace of this season comes to us through Christ. That the peace of this promise of peace is grounded in God's promise to us that he wants us to feel comfort. Comfort, oh comfort my people. Comfort, oh comfort my people. That's what God wants to give us, is peace in this season. So in the midst of all the chaos, find it for yourself. Now,